but you would definitely recognize her voice if you have attended some of the major Japanese culture events, talks, or workshops in Malaysia. She's no other than the Malaysian iconic Japanese interpreter Ms. KUME Akiko. 久米さん、こんばんは。
こんばんは、えっちゃん。
木曜日トークショーようこそ。
ありがとうございます。お招きいただきまして。
本日、貴重なお時間くださってありがとうございます。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
こちらこそご招待いただいてありがとうございます。
久米さん、マレーシアで主要な日本文化イベントを、英訳して日本文化のファン、誰でも久米さんのお声をよくしています。しかし、久米さんのことはほとんど知らないと思いますので、まず、簡単なご自己紹介いただけるでしょうか。
はい、わかりました。私は国籍はいまだに日本なんですけど、もう7歳の時からずっと海外生活をしてて、それは父が商社に勤めていたからなんですけど、初めに行った海外がシンガポール、そしてその後マレーシアで、マレーシアで高校を卒業して、大学の初めの2年間は日本の国際キリスト教大学に行き、そしてその後アメリカの大学に、トランスファーして卒業して、またマレーシアに戻ってきたんです。
ということは日本に滞在する時間というどのぐらいでしょうか。
だから7歳の時までと、あと大学通ってた頃、の2年ちょっと、だから10年ぐらいです。
じゃあほとんど海外でしょうね。
はい。
すごいですよね。なるほど。
だから一番長く住んでるのがマレーシアなんですけど。
じゃあマレーシアはどのぐらい滞在してますか？
だから、子供の頃、中学高校の5年間と、あと、卒業してからこっちに来て、もう30年になります。
じゃあもうマレーシア人になると思いますよね。
そうね。だけど相変わらずマレー語は下手です。
でもマレーシアの文化がよく知ると思いますね。すごいすごい。で、ご趣味は何でしょうか？
趣味は馬です。乗馬です。
それはどうしてですか？
それはうちの両親が学生時代から馬に乗っていて、その影響があって子供の時からずっと馬のそばにいて、真面目に乗り始めたのが9歳ぐらいの時かしら。私馬にアレルギーなんです。ですから子供の頃は、両親と一緒に馬場に行って、初めのうちはいいんだけど、だんだん目が痒くなって、鼻水が出て、もう痒くなってどうしようもなくなっちゃうっていう状態だったんです。
でも今、馬好きになってますよね。
そうですね。やっぱり、だんだんなんか免疫というか、ができて、反応し敏感にならなくなって、今ではなんともないんですけど。
今でも競馬ですか？乗馬つけてますか？乗馬つけてますか？
はい。毎日やってます。
毎日？じゃあ馬と一緒に住んでいるでしょうね。
そうですね。乗馬クラブの隣に住んでます。だから、マレーシアは夕方雨降ることが多いでしょ？毎朝、暗いうちに馬場に行って、運動させて、で、仕事に行くっていうのが日課です。
なるほど。すごいですね。
馬も犬みたいに毎日出してあげて、運動させないと体調が崩れちゃうんで、自分の楽しみというのもあるけど、馬のことも考えて毎日行ってます。
そうですね。やっぱりそうですね。 ね、馬でも犬でも、飼ってるときはすごく責任があると思いますよね。あるいは大変だと思います。うん。そうですか。これでちょっと、久米さんの英語のことについて聞きたいと思いますが、失礼かもしれませんが、多くの日本の方が英語を話すときはなかなかちょっと癖が入っていますが、久米さんは全然そういうことはないんですね。それは、英語は話者のように話されていると思いますので、久米さんはどんな工夫されているんでしょうか？
何も工夫も考えてもいません。初めにだから海外に行ったのがシンガポールだったんですけど、当
ええ
初は日本人学校に通ってたんです。だ
はい。
けど、その頃の日本人学校はジャングルの隣、シンガポールなのに、なんかジャングルの隣で、
え
教室
え
も縦床式、下が
え
空っぽなんですよね。で、授業中になんか下の方で変な音がすると、他のクラスメイトが「蛇だよ、蛇が出てきてる」って言って、
え
で、なん
え
か、東京から来た自分にはなんか変な学校だな、こんなとこ嫌だななんて思って、両親に文
なるほど。
句言ったら、
うん、
他に
うん、
は英語の学校しかないから、そっち行く？って聞かれて、
うん、
で、なんか気安く、うんって言っちゃったんです。英語喋れないのに。それでずっと英語の、教育を受けてたんで、初めは全然話せなかったけど、
うん、
友達と遊びなが
うん、
ら、はい、いつの間にか。
やっぱりその環境があるということですね。やっぱり周りの人がまあ、英語を話してくれてるからね。
そうですね。自然にやっぱりそういうのを聞いて、
うんうんうんうんうんうんうんうん。
気が付いたら話せるようになってたって感じです。
あ、なるほどね。なるほどね。でも、進学するが、なんで日本の大学2年間でしたっけ？で、そ
うん、
れで UCLA に行っ
そう
たんですね。その理由はやっぱり、
初めに日本の大学行ったのは、その時点でもう海外生活10年で、うちの
あ、
父はロサンゼルスに転勤になったんですけど、私だ
うん、
け日本語の勉強行ってこいって親に言われて、いやいや行ったんですね。
うんうん
で、
うんうん。
ICU には私のような帰国子女、も結構入っていったんですけど、そう
うん
いう子
うんうん。
たちはみんな日本語が話せるけど漢字がダメっていうんで、
あ
スペシャルジャパニーズっていう授業を2年間受けなきゃいけないんです。
あ、なるほどなるほどなるほど。
で、
うんうん
内容は
うん。
基本的に漢字を毎週
うんうんうんうんうん
勉強するっていうあれだったんですけど、2年でようやく終わって、もう
うん。
東京に住みたくないとダダをこ
あ
ねて、
あ。
で、UCLA にトランスファーしちゃったんです。
あ、なるほどなるほど。それと、米国にはどのぐらい滞在しましたか？
だからアメリカも3年ぐらいかな、
うんうん
いたのは。
うんうんうんうん。あ、なるほどねなるほどね。だから日本語英語もどんどんどんどん、ネイティブスピーカーになると思う。
そうですね。ICU は一応日本にある大学ですけど、私みた
うん、
いな帰国子女も多く、あ
うん、
と留学生も多かったんで、授
うん、
業の3分の1ぐらいは英語で教わる授業だったんです。
うん、うん、
で、日本語の授業も講義は日本語だけど、レポートは英語で書いていいっていう先生方が結構いて、だ
あ、
から、うん、
なるほど。
まあ、ずっと英語を使ってました。
ああ、でも、英語を勉強するときは何か工夫しましたか？
うん、何も。
何も、何も自然に。じゃあ、L1、まあ、First Language になっちゃうかもしれないですね、そういえばね。
そうね。今は、何語が得意と言われると、英語の方
うん、
が得意ですね。
なるほどなるほど。
知っている単語の種類も英語の方が多いし。
あ、なるほどなるほど。あ、そうですか。うん、面白いですね。うんうんうんうん。はい、わかりました。じゃあ、じゃ、次、はい。えっと、 久米さんの本職のことについていろいろ聞きたいと思いますが、これから、マレーシア、多くのマレーシア方が、特に通訳のことについてすごく興味がありますので、じゃあこれから英語でお話ししましょう。
わかりました。
Now, I understand that you prefer a job as an interpreter than a translator. But from what I've seen, especially among my friends and my peers, I see many will prefer a translator job. It's because that they have time to think and then edit their work. Yeah. And but why would you prefer to be an interpreter?
I don't like sitting in front of the computer to begin with.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're sitting in front of one now.
No. I mean, in the sense that, typing away diligently, that's not something, I don't like sitting still. And with translation, I find I'm not very efficient. It takes me a long time because I'll translate and then I'll look at it again and I think, oh, what was I thinking? This is wrong. And then edit. And then I look at it the next day, I have to edit again. And I guess maybe I'm not naturally much of a writer, so it takes more energy, perhaps.
I see.
And as opposed to that, with interpreting, I've met people who don't like it so much because they don't like to speak in front of a big group or, um, having the spotlight on you kind of thing. And I've never had a problem with that. Um, not to say I like performing or anything of the kind, but when I was younger, I used to compete in horse riding competitions, and all my friends are complaining, "Oh, I'm so nervous, my heart's fluttering," and I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" So I don't feel pressures so much in those situations.
So
It
you're
just
very
comes.
natural in front of people, I believe.
It's easier.
I see. But I think sometimes it's because that when you stand in front of people and when you try to interpret someone who's about to speak, and you never know what will happen next. And that's something that will keep us on the toe, and not many people able to withstand that sort of stress, I believe. But I guess you're different.
Well, for me, it's important that I get lots of sleep because I find that otherwise my concentration is not so good. So if they say something off the cuff or they speak too quickly, um, I can't follow as quickly. Uh, but yeah, as long as I've rested properly, then I'm okay.
But okay, but you interpret for different type of people, right? Every people have their way, their style of speaking. Sometimes they speak fast, sometimes they speak, sometimes they speak in circle, round and round. I believe quite a number of Japanese will speak round and round. In the end, I'm lost. I don't know what what the person is trying to speak in the end. So how were you able to maneuver, or how do you able to navigate through all these different styles of speaking?
Nowadays, I guess because I've had enough experience over the years, it doesn't throw me off as much. Um, it is true. Most of my job are people that I meet for the first time, and I probably will never meet again. So that is one of the pressures of the job. You don't know what their habits are or how they speak or how they think, structure their sentences. So yes, some people are difficult because you don't know what's the objective or where they're trying, what they're the meaning that they're trying to get across. Um, but so yeah, you really do have to concentrate.
Hi. That's the point that I think that put off a lot of people to 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 be an interpreter, I guess.
Mm.
But how did you start off as an interpreter? What was that your career choice?
No.
Oh, okay.
um,
And,
when I came back to KL for the second time, I was
mm,
introduced to a Japanese lady who was
mm,
working as an interpreter through a mutual acquaintance. And
mm,
I'd never done interpreting work. I had taken a course on simultaneous interpreting at
mm,
my university, but that was it. And she said, I actually was asked to do this job, but I was already committed for something else. Would you be interested? So I said, sure, without knowing anything. uh,
mm,
and that's how I started. So initially, it was like a part-time job,
mm,
just
mm,
to
mm,
do it since I wasn't working full-time at the time.
mm, mm,
And
mm.
then gradually, it became my full-time job.
But can you remember your first job?
I actually can't.
Oh, okay.
It was a seminar,
Awesome.
technical. I think it was a mold and die,
Mm,
plastic injection
mm,
molding.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. So, but that would require some technical terms and things like that. And how would you able to get through that?
So for that job, they had some material available ahead of time, which I read and
Ah,
studied ahead. But
all right.
this was when internet wasn't so widely
Mm,
used. So
mm,
it
mm,
was, depending on the job, it was quite challenging because
mm.
the side that hires me wasn't always very organized and wouldn't be able to give me the related documents ahead of time. So yeah, that used to be tough. Nowadays, it's so much easier.
Oh, yeah, yeah. With the internet, I guess that is much. What do you call that? Mm, convenient for everybody, I guess. Yeah.
Even if your client can't give, say, the draft of their speech or presentation, if you
Mm,
know what the subject is, you can Google, no? And then you
mm,
can
mm,
start
mm,
to get
mm,
some idea, some of the terminology, some of the technology, and all that. But yeah.
mm, 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 mm. I see. Okay. Now, just now earlier you were talking about you took a course on the simultaneous interpretation course. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, it, the course is in the United States that you took.
No, in Japan, my university in Japan.
Ah, all right. And how long
It was
was the
just
course?
for a semester, so one term for about
Oh,
10
it's a
weeks.
part of your program there.
Yeah, in
Mm,
university, no, there's certain classes you must take for your
mm,
major, and then
mm,
you have
mm,
electives, things that you
mm,
can
mm.
do for out of interest, and I
I
did
see.
that as an
Just only
option.
one semester, and then
They
your
on-
break.
they only they only offered it one term because it was taught by this very famous Japanese simultaneous interpreter. She was
Mm,
already about to retire. I think she was in her late 60s.
ah,
So it was a
mm,
very rare opportunity, and I was
mm.
quite lucky to get a spot in class.
And what was your take in that course? What have you learned in that? Something that strikes you, or it remains in your mind for a long time.
Well, it wasn't so much you do A and B and C, and then you can do this
Mm,
kind of
mm, mm,
lesson.
mm,
Um, but I guess one of the things I remember particularly is that she told us you must not try and take notes when the person you're supposed to be translating for starts speaking, because you can never keep up. Even if you use shorthand, it never works. So she says you have to develop your own symbols and maybe write one word or two words. Otherwise, you just get left behind. And
hey,
which I found interesting, and I tried to do it, but yeah, I haven't come up with too many good symbols.
but I thought all the interpreter writes in shorthand. I mean, because I can see everybody start scribbling, but
I don't. I don't even know how to do shorthand.
oh, okay.
So normally, so sometimes my clients, after seeing me writing during the course of the day, say, "Can I have a copy of your notes, or can you write minutes for us?" And I say, "I really can't, because I can go back and look, and I can remember the rough gist of the conversation that took place, but because it's not proper notes, I wouldn't guarantee this is it."
I see, I see. Very interesting, very interesting. Especially how to remember. I, especially when people talk so fast and then you try to catch up with them
Mm.
and taking less notes. So it's something that you must have a very good memory, I guess.
Yeah, but like I said, you don't actually stop and think. Um, you hear it and you just say it in another language. So sometimes I actually can't remember everything later on if you ask me. I don't know if that's normal or if
Uh,
really good interpreters can remember, but that's the case with me. Um, I find
okay.
if I stop and start thinking, then yeah, I get left behind.
I see, I see. Hey, hey. Because I always find it very difficult. I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm. What do you call that? Off and on, I do interpret,
Mhm.
but not in front of people, but just like over with 2-3% sitting on the table, and then you just help each other what
Right.
the other party is saying, and sometimes you can't remember what do you call that. You have to ask them to wait, let me finish before you talk. And sometimes, of course, they get very agitated. It's because now you break my thought. I find it extremely difficult, especially when because the Japanese sentence structure and the
Mhm.
English sentence structure is very different,
Mm.
and you have to wait for the Japanese to finish the sentence before you can start talking in
Mm.
English. Because in English, I mean, most of the time the verbs are in the second place, while the Japanese verbs are at the end of the sentence. So,
Mm.
if how do you go about it to especially when you try to interpret sentence by sentence?
So it depends. If it's consecutive translation, interpretation, you have to tell your client ahead of
Mm,
time. Don't
mm,
speak in big paragraphs. You have to cut it short, not only
ah,
to make my job easier, but also for the sake of the listener. Because for the person listening, if there's this big gap, silent or period where the person is speaking in Japanese where
mm,
they
mm,
don't understand,
mm.
then it kind of loses the momentum of the conversation. And so for everybody concerned, I think it's better if they can keep it into shorter segments.
So they have to say one or two sentences and they
Mm,
pause and they let you finish the sentence before they go.
mhm.
I see.
But with
Mm,
simultaneous, because you pretty much have to do it at the same time,
mm,
um,
mm, mm, mm.
but the sentences are structured differently, like you just described. So normally I would wait until maybe they're one third of the way or halfway through their sentence, then I can start, and
Mm.
then I will finish a little after they finish their sentence.
That
So
need enough. Good.
yeah, I have to keep listening while I'm saying what they said a few seconds ago.
Wow. How do you manage to do that?
Mm,
It's
with me,
natural.
because I've never had a formal training, so it's been
Okay.
all on the job training. And once again, if I don't have enough sleep, I find my reaction
Mm,
is not so good.
I guess you have a talent for that for this job, I believe, because I find it very difficult but of course, I mean, we are not trained, so maybe we would have find it very difficult to do so.
It's same with everything. It's just a matter of practice. So I'm sure if you were placed in a situation where you have to do it, it will come more naturally for you.
Perhaps maybe.
What
But
some interpreters
mm,
like to do is
mm,
say they turn on the news and then they pretend that's their client
uh,
and translate simultaneously. That's a way of practicing.
but but news are a bit formal language, right?
Mm.
That is all reported. A report is a reported speech, right? So it's a bit different than normal
Normal
speeches.
speech. Yeah,
Mm.
well, but it's similar to, say, seminar presentations and things like that. So it doesn't have to be news, really. You can even do it with a drama if you want to start off, simple and repeat what this character just said, but in another language, and see if you
Wow.
can keep, you know, in listening to what's going on in the next scene. Or
I
it's just
wonder how we
a
could do
matter of
that.
practice.
But it's a very good idea. It's a good idea that maybe hi for those who like to become an interpreter or translator, they could try you
Mm,
that way and see whether they can make a difference. But talking about interpreting, let's talk about the content.
mhm,
I at, there are times, for example, that when I was asked to interpret, yeah, that okay, please tell that person exactly what I want to talk to you. But I find that sometimes that the content is a little bit offensive,
uh-huh.
and you say something, that person was, you know agitate that person, and sort of it doesn't really, how to say that, the there's no harmony
Mhm.
between the conversation. I'm just talking about conversation. I'm not talking about giving speeches. I'm talking about conversation. I mean, interpreting between two person or maybe
Right.
two businessmen talking to each other. Maybe they
Mhm.
talk about terms and things like that. There are times that I felt that no, don't say in this word. Let me say something softer.
Mhm.
So is that professional? I'm sorry, I'm just talking about my own personal experience only, right? But to a professional interpreter like you, how do you go about it?
Well, generally, Japanese are very polite, so it's quite rare you have a situation where, they say something offensive or
Mm,
discriminatory or things like that. Um, but once in a while, they do inadvertently, say something which, if I translate it exactly as they said,
mm,
could be taken as offensive.
mm,
So in
mm,
those cases, I may change the choice of word. S-
mm, mm,
Um, so the message still gets through, but
mm,
not using that exact same word. The thing with interpreting is you're not always necessarily saying just the English equivalent of the Japanese word, for example.
mm,
The
mm,
important thing is to communicate the essence of what they're trying to say. So you
mm,
don't have to be 100% faithful to the choice of words.
what?
Yeah, I think.
Mm. But I think perhaps because you are a lady, so businessman in front of you maybe will speak more polite. Because I
Mhm.
guess when you are a man and then the two businessmen are also men, and when they talk, so it could be slightly different, I guess.
Yeah,
Perhaps
I'm
I
sure.
do not know.
I
So
can
you have
imagine.
advantage. You have advantage over. Right? So in the course of your job, all right, perhaps maybe you could uh, talk to us about your one of your greatest achievement,
Greatest achievement.
something that you feel very satisfied doing that job, and perhaps maybe that's why. I know
Um,
everything is good. maybe
no, no,
maybe
no,
one.
no, no, no. Each job, whenever I finish, I think, "Oh God, I should have said that," or "That was a stupid thing to do," or yeah, it's
Mm,
always like that. I wouldn't say
mm,
there's been best job ever or anything of the kind, but I suppose Well, certain days I do perform better than others. So on those occasions, yeah, I do go home thinking, yeah, today wasn't so bad. Um,
Mm,
but there's always something I could have done better, really. Mm.
Oh, okay. Maybe perhaps you can talk to us about something that not so pleasant. Yeah,
Not so
like
pleasant.
especially when you maybe you make certain mistakes in when doing the interpreting job. Or is there any or during such or okay, let's say that you made a mistake
Hmm.
in interpreting. I mean, in part of mistake in interpreting just a few sentence, for
Hmm.
example. Okay,
Hmm.
during such situation, what would you do?
Um, there's been times when I've gotten a number wrong, and
A
usually
number.
somebody who's in part of the delegation would be kind enough to point it out. So I'll
Mm,
say,
mm,
"Oh,
mm, mm,
I'm sorry. I made a mistake there," and
mm,
then
mm,
I will restate that section.
mm, mm,
Um,
mm, mm.
or other times, sometimes they use a phrase or they say something which I can't understand. So I will have to stop and turn to the speaker and say, "Can you say that again?" Or "What do you mean by that?" Which interrupts the flow, but I need to seek clarification um, to
Mm,
be
mm,
able
mm,
to,
mm,
yeah,
mm, mm,
translate
mm, mm,
properly.
mm. I
In
see.
the early days, sometimes I was too nervous to say it.
Mm, mm, mm.
Um, but yeah, now I will say, "Sorry, I'm sorry, I can't understand it. Can you tell me?"
So it's all right to turn to the speaker and say, "Hey, what were you saying?"
Yeah, of course.
You mean you
because
don't stand next to the
because
speaker, or quite,
sorry.
you're quite far away from the speaker, or you're just standing next to the speaker?
Um, diff- I can be either. If it's a conference room, sometimes I'm sitting at one end of the long table and they're on the other side, or I
Mm.
could be standing right next to the person. But it's always the same.
I see, I see, I see. Okay, okay. Sorry, earlier you were about to say something. I just cut off. Sorry. You
I
remember what you said?
forgot.
I'm
No,
sorry.
sorry.
I should have let you speak. My
No, no, no,
apology.
no, no, no.
But yeah, I think yes. If you don't, yeah, it's rather than interpret wrongly. It's better to find out what. Yeah. Oh,
Mm.
that's great. And
And also,
yeah.
some people they forget, or maybe they're
Mm,
not accustomed to using an interpreter, so uh, they may talk too long, or they may
mm.
talk too fast. So every so often you say, "Could you speak a little slower for me?" Or you know, give them feedback. And normally it's something they're doing unconsciously anyway, so they'll
Okay.
they'll
Okay.
appreciate you making that comment as well.
But before you take the job, normally you will have a meeting with the speaker.
Sometimes, but other times no, because
Oh,
they
you do.
come
You
from
do.
Japan and
Uh,
they contact me by email and I say
uh,
fine, and maybe they'll give me some materials, but I meet them for the very first time in the morning, just before we head to the meeting. So
oh, oh,
yeah,
okay, okay. So
I
you
don't
don't
have
really,
the luxury of having a briefing ahead of time.
but it'd be nice to have such briefing, right? To understand what.
Mm, it would, uh, I guess, if it's like a presentation in a big conference,
Mm,
definitely.
mm, mm,
But
mm,
if it's more like a business discussion, not so
mm,
much.
But they won't tell you like what is the objective of their visit to Malaysia and what they hope to achieve.
Normally, they would mention that in the email. So
Ah,
beforehand, when they book you, and then
mm, mm, mm,
sometimes
mm,
you can also what often happens is if they have several meetings throughout the day, and they've hired me for the whole day. I will meet them at the hotel they're staying at. So we sometimes might meet 30 minutes before it's time to leave for the first appointment, and then they can brief me then.
I see. And what was your most challenging job, by the way?
Challenging. I was just in Singapore the week before. There was a defense ministers conference. That was a bit intimidating because I hadn't done defense related. I have done some defense related work, but not this kind of a conference. And then I found out through other interpreters that this was considered a really difficult job. So I was getting a little worried, but it turned out okay.
But with your experience, I don't think anything can be an obstacle to you. Hey, hey, hey. I see. Okay, let's talk about some do's and don'ts as an interpreter, because I'm sure that many students, Japanese language students, may one day wish to be an interpreter or a translator. Yeah. What are the do's and don'ts as an interpreter?
Don'ts. I guess if there's anything you don't understand, don't be afraid to speak up and ask questions, clarifications. Yeah, show up for work on time and make sure you're ready to be focused 100%. I've seen some situations where they were up late working on another project, and when they came, maybe their concentration wasn't quite what it normally is, and they weren't able to do their job as well. But really, at the end of the day, interpreting is one of those jobs, no? Sure, each time you translate what one person is saying in a language into another, but the subject matter is always different. The setting is different. The person is different. So each occasion is very different. So in that sense, it's difficult to, I guess, prepare 100%. You don't know what's going to happen, and the best way to get around that is develop as big a vocabulary as you can in both languages. Read up on the subject matter if you can before the day. It may not be of any use, but it might be useful. You never know. So,
but people will have their own, what they call that, preference, right? Some people like music. Some people like what they call that, mechanics. Some people like politics or economics. So it's difficult to learn something that you don't like, right? So I mean, a translator or interpreter would have to learn all kinds of field, or is it better to maybe specialize in a certain field?
Well, I've heard that in Japan, because there's so many interpreters, they do. Some people specialize in certain fields like medical or legal or whatever, and they only do that. So that's one way of doing it. But in Malaysia, there aren't that many jobs, so often it's over a wide, diverse area. But in a way, it's also been very interesting to me in the sense that it's exposed me to worlds that I would never have known otherwise. Like one of my more regular clients is the Japan Coast Guard. But until I met them, I never knew what kind of job the Coast Guard did. The first job was a anti-piracy conference that they organized in Malaysia because the Malacca Straits is a very important waterway, and there were
Yeah.
some pirate incidents, and they wanted to help the countries along the Malacca Straits to combat it. And because of them, I got to ride in a patrol vessel uh,
Wow.
and
Okay.
also ride out on a speedboat to the middle of the Malacca Straits. Uh, Another occasion, I managed to get on a destroyer of the Japanese Self-Defense Force. That was interesting. Um,
Hey.
I got to go to the Olympics as an interpreter for the Japanese equestrian team. Um,
Hey.
and I got a pass, so I could go to all these different places that people with tickets wouldn't have been able to go to. So yeah, there's if you end up accepting a job that you don't know anything about, there is that pressure and apprehension whether you'll be able to handle it. What are they going to talk about? But it also lets you experience things you never
Hey.
would have had a chance. So that was good.
So you have all the perks.
Yeah.
Hey. Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. So it's one of the perks. If the audience, any of you wish to be interpreter, this is one good reason for being one. Oh, is there any other do's and don'ts? Because you're talking about all the perks, but is there anything that the interpreter should refrain from doing?
I feel as an interpreter, you are doing a good job if they forget that you're there. I mean, obviously, you're physically there between the two sides talking, so you're not going to disappear, but it should be so that um, I shouldn't put in my opinions or views in
Mm,
whatever I say. I've seen some interpreters do that, maybe because they're not so confident, but yeah, what they say is not exactly what the speaker said, and I think it should be. Your existence shouldn't be obvious in what you say.
to there and not to be something that to be there but not to be
Yeah.
known and not to be seen. What others?
Mm, I can't think of any. Speak clearly. Sometimes when people get nervous, no, they end up speaking a bit too fast, or their voice gets a bit quieter. Then it's difficult for people around you to hear what you're saying. So it's always important to, yeah, pronounce things clearly.
I see. By the way, talking about pronunciation, you have a very good, very clear dictation, very
Uh-huh.
clear pronunciation. How do you practice to do so?
Once again, I haven't practiced, but I suspect I should be thanking my mother because when I was going to primary school, English primary school, one of the assignments we used to have is you take home a book and you're supposed to read out loud to your parent, and then they tick this card to prove that yes, you did the assignment. And when I do that, my mother would always be scolding me, don't mumble, speak clearly, look up, speak through your diaphragm, that kind of thing. Likewise, initially, when I was in junior high school, I used to do correspondence Japanese courses. So they would send these uh, Japanese language course materials from Japan workbooks and things like that, and the textbook, and you're supposed to study just like a regular Japanese student would do. And my mother would sit next to me and go through the lessons. But when you read the textbook, she won't let me read it quietly to myself. I have to read it out loud. And once again, if I don't say things clearly, then I get scolded.
I think that's a very good training, I guess, because
Yeah, it
yeah,
does make you conscious, no? It's one of those things, unless someone tells you, you don't realize.
and also helps you to speak confidently in front of people, I guess.
Mm. And
Mm,
also
mm,
in
mm.
school, I did a bit of debating, and
Ah, I,
uh, the high school I went to was an American style international school, and they do make you speak a lot in front of the
mm,
class.
mm,
So
mm,
that was also
mm,
good
mm,
training, I think,
mm,
in
mm, mm.
hindsight.
I, hey. I see, I see. All right, okay. Now, I'm sure that as I said earlier, that many Japanese language learners maybe aspire to be an interpreter.
Hmm.
Okay. What are the qualities of a good interpreter?
Interpreter, well, it helps if you like being around people. You're not shy. Um, and yeah, being flexible. Things are always not going to go according to plan. So yeah, even if they give you a schedule ahead of time, or this person is going to say this, quite often that ends up not being the case. So you can't let little changes upset you or throw you off.
Uh, I see, I see. So ones have to be very flexible, I'd say.
Mm.
Mm, patient, flexible, working with people. Uh, okay,
So I guess
okay.
if you don't like those, but you still like language, then
Mm,
maybe being a translator would be a better fit, because you don't have to deal with that kind of
mm, mm,
sudden
mm,
changes, no?
mm, 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 But just now earlier you were mentioning about that you be there, how would you say that? You are there but not there, all right?
Mm.
So meaning that you're not putting any of your personality inside
Mhm,
when you translate or when you
mhm,
interpret.
mhm.
Yeah. So meaning that you'll be assuming the personality of the speaker or just being very neutral.
Neutral. Uh, so if you were to say, you know, I'll be going to London tomorrow.
Mm.
As an interpreter, I don't say Edwin says that he is going to London tomorrow. Like
Okay.
I would say I'm going to London tomorrow, just like you said it. Do you know what
But
I mean? I don't
okay,
refer
I
to
see.
you as a third person.
Person, yeah, just so if that person makes a joke and then you also try to make that joke in English,
Yes.
does it work?
Sometimes, sometimes no. Yeah, I hate proverbs and jokes and
I think jokes are a bit difficult to translate because it will lose the nuances because I believe the joke should be told in the original language. Then you
Mm.
appreciate the joke. Yeah.
Well, some jokes they're situational, no? So it can be said in a different language, but other
Mm,
jokes, yeah, it's sometimes a play on the words, or uh, some
mm.
cultural reference, then they
Yeah.
wouldn't understand, would they?
Right. So even that also you will
If that's
try.
the case, if it's some cultural thing, I- I'll I'll interpret what they said, and then I'll add act, how what this joke is referring to is in Japan it's like this, and And then I would provide some
あ
supplementary information so that they can understand.
あ、okay. Or you just say, hey, he's telling a joke, please laugh.
I should
Or
try
you don't do
that.
that.
I should try that.
I'm not sure you would.
Never mind, just clap.
That, well, at least everybody laugh.
Mm.
I see. But to become a near native speaker is I think it's quite a big hurdle, especially when you're not in that environment.
Mm.
They are talking about, let's say that even, for example, Malaysians want to be a Japanese interpreter, for example.
Mhm.
But most probably, maybe they will listen in Japanese and translate it in Malay or in English, I guess, and not.
It's easier to translate into the language that you're good at. So,
No.
but yes, being in that environment where the language is spoken is helpful because you can develop an ear for it, and there's certain phrases, no, that come as a set, and then you become it kind of you absorb it, not just as individual words, but this word goes with this kind of thing. For me,
But
because I find I retain a lot of vocabulary through my ears. So if I hear a phrase often enough, then I can recall it easier as opposed to if I read it the same number of times.
I see, I see. なるほどね。Because I find that, especially when you interpret in a business environment, you're required to have both a good good proficiency in both languages, rather than just in one. But
Sure.
otherwise, it's a bit difficult to translate. Yeah.
Mm.
It's a big task. Hi, I'm sure, but I'm sure that the Japanese company will be willing to pay. Okay. Hi. Now, let's move to the last part of our interview. ちょっと、
Okay.
久米さんの将来のことについて、ちょっと聞きたいと思いますが、
何ですか？
通訳の仕事を多分つけると思いますが、何かまた新しい企画を考えていますか？これから。
いえ、特に具体的な計画はないです。このままもう少しうまくなれたらなと思ってます。
なるほど。でもせっかくあれですね、通訳の経験がすごく豊富なので、なんか将来、何か本にしたらとてもいいなと思っていますが、いかがでしょうか？
だけどさっきも言ったように私書くのが苦手なの。だから本を書くなんて言ったらゾッとしちゃう。
そうか。なるほどね。じゃあ、オーディオブック。
さんはあれじゃないんですよね。いかにも本書けるような感じじゃないですか。エドワーズさんは本を書くの得意そうな感じじゃないですか。私は全然そうじゃないから。
で、実はちょっと最近、本出版したんです。
ほら。
はい。それが物語なんですけれども、でも恥ずかしいなことなんですが、それ、はい、ちょっと兄弟として作ったんですが、ね、はい。でも、やっぱり久米さんの経験がすごいなので、はい。もったいないですね。
いや、共有できるようなもんじゃないです。教えるのも、あんまり正確に合ってないし。
講師もしないですか？例えば、
興味ないです。
そうなんですか。そうか、もったいないですね。
あと、ある意味、 ね、今まで自然にっていうか、特に何も考えずに通訳になって、で、
うん。
少しずつまともになってったんで、
うん。
上手くなるコツとか、全然そういうのも知らないし、教えてあげられないから。
いやいやいやいや、もったいないもったいない。うんうん。そうですか。ちょっと残念ですね。うん。じゃあ、それで、じゃあずっと通訳の仕事を続けるということですね。
そうですね、仕事として。
うん。
はい、自由時間がいっぱいできるんで、はい、私には向いてます。
なるほどね。なるほど。でも、それで一年中忙しくはないということですね。だから時期によりますか？
いや、別にこの季節だからどうっていうことはないですね、今までの
はい。
経験で。はい。
うん。でも、コビ d はとても大変じゃないですか。
何がコ
えっと、
ロナ
はい、コロナ禍
コロナ
で、
禍の時
はい。
はほとんど仕事ありませんでした。
でも、Zoom とか、オンライン
少しはあっ
での通訳
たんです
じゃない。
けど、私の場合は大抵日本側が雇ってくれるんですよね。
はいはいはい。
で、コロナの時は、
うん、
通訳さんどこにいるか関係ない
うん。
し、
はい。
大抵1回きり、っていう仕事なんで、多
うんうん。
分皆さん、日本にいらっしゃる通訳さんにお願いして、Zoom と
うん。
かされてたんじゃないでしょうか。
ああ、なるほど。そういうことか。なるほど
うん。
なるほど。
ですから、マレー
はい。
シアにある会社とか、組織、国際交流基金とか
ええ
からは、
ええええええ。
声かけていただいて、
うん
ちょっ
うん。
とオンラインの仕事はしてましたけど、
うんうん。
私のを雇ってくださる方々は大半が日本からの出張者だったん
なるほ
で、
どね。うん
はい。
うん。でもね、今 IT すごく進んでて、
うん、
将来、
うん。
もう通訳者ではなく AI を使って通訳する可能性が高いではないかなと思っていますが、
確かにね、ちっちゃい、
うん。
通訳機器とかありますよね。1
えええ
万円ぐらいで
えええ。
買えるの。
はい。それはもう将来的将来的、それの通訳という職業はなくなるではないかなと思ってますが、どう
なくな
思いますか？
ることはないんじゃないかな。や
あ
っぱり機
あ、
械はプログラミングしないといけないじゃないですか。だか
うん、
ら、
うん、
よくあるシナリオなんかの通訳、またはカジュ
うん、
アルな場面の通
うん、
訳は
うん、
任せられるかもしれないけど、やっ
うん。
ぱり大事な話、えーどんな話になるかわかんないような時には、やっぱり人間の方がいいんじゃないかなと自分では思いますけど。
なるほど。多分 AI は感情を伝えないかもしれないですね。人間
うん。
が一番、
あとちょっとしたヌアンスっていうか、
うん、
はっき
うん、
り言ってないけど、ほんとはこう
うん。
いうことをほのめかしてるとか、あるじゃ
はいはい。
ないですか。
そうですね、
そう
そうです。
いうのは、もしかし多分ダメなんじゃないかな、まだ。
なるほどなるほど。じゃあ、はい、仕
ね、
事まだある
AI っ
ということで。
ていうのは AI っていうのは、人間より早く同じ作業できたりとか、そういうの
うん、うん。
は得意だけど、
うんうんうんうんうんうん
教えたことしか教えたこ
うん。うん。
とをその通りにやるっていうことしかできませんよね、基本的に。
そうですね。そうですね。そういえばそうですね。なるほどね。はいはい。わかりました。本当今日はいろいろ勉強させていただいてありがとうございます。すごく
とんでも
参考になり
ないです。
ます。では、最後ですが、久美
はい。
さんが好きな日本語の言葉や
はい。
表現ありますか？
好きというか、はい、よく考えることは、なんとかなるっていうことかな。
そうですか。それはどうしてですか？
もともとの性格が楽観的というか、オプティミ
うん。
ス
うん、
って
うん、
いうのも
うん、
あるんじゃないかとは思うし、
うん、うん、
ちょっと適当なところもあるのも理由かもしれませんけど、まあ、通訳の仕事にしても、 もちろんできるだけ準備はするけど、すべてはもう完璧にできない。資料をもらえないとか、ね、ちゃんと説明してもらえなかったとか、まあその辺はもうくよくよせず、もう、ね、できることやったんだから、もうあとは大丈夫って。
なるほど、なるほど。
言い切って。
わかります。私もこれが好きですよ。もうストレスにならないように。はい、今日本当ありがとうございました。
ないです。
はい、じゃあさよなら。バイバイ。
じゃあお元気で。さよなら。
はい、バイバイ。